All right, 11CP. Let's talk about this romantic hero film project. We're ready to start on the PowerPoint this week. This is due on Friday by 11:59 p.m. So specifically, this is going to show you kind of what it should look like, give you some ideas about how to structure it and how to make sure that you're doing things in the right order, and making sure that you have everything you need. Um, so while we go through this, I recommend that you get out your your romantic hero project sheet. All right, with all of the requirements, and there's a checklist on the back that was attached to our lesson plans this week and in week 1. So go ahead and get that out, and we'll go over what we need to get started. All right, are we ready to start on the project? So to be fully prepared, to make sure that you're on the right track, that you have everything you need to do the project well, make sure that you can answer these following statements truthfully. I've read chapters 1 through 5 and then 8 and 9 of the Virginian, and I answered the reading questions on chapters 5, 8, and 9. I emailed Mrs. Sauer my movie choice and I got it confirmed. I filled out the worksheets for the Virginian and for the film Hero, and I watched and I re-watched the film that I'm going to be studying because, you know, if I watched it a few months ago, if I have just a general knowledge of it, that's really not going to let you go as in-depth as you're going to need to. So there was time built into our lesson in week 1 for you to watch that film again, and if it's going to be helpful, you know, turn it on in the background while you're working. That might actually be a good way to have it ready to use. So you'll notice that most of these things are from week 1, and most of us have already done these things. But just as a check, if you were kind of a little late on some of the assignments in week 1, you really need to have these things done in order to do the project. All right, so this is step 1. Do not do the project if you haven't done these things beforehand. So the first thing that we need to make sure we have is a thesis statement, and I recommend doing this kind of early on so that you have a basis of your analysis that you're going to kind of build on and build around. So you want to start by reviewing your sheets. What do the characters have in common? And if you'll remember, I kind of decided that I was going to do Pocahontas with the Virginian. So I've copy and pasted here some of the similarities from our first videos about this project, that they exist outside society, outside of the structures of civilization, and you can see civilized is kind of in quotes because they're really not necessarily less civilized than the other characters and structures from the other side. You know, there's just kind of like a prejudice going on between East and West in both of the stories. They both have a love of nature and wilderness and animals, and Pocahontas has her grandmother tree. So I've reviewed my sheets and I've kind of pulled out the similarities that I have in common, and I'm going to kind of look to see how I can pull those together into a working thesis statement. We have lots of stuff in our notebooks about thesis statements, so if you need additional support, you need to go back and look through those pages. So this is what I came up with for my first stab at my thesis. Living on the edge of the civilized world, Pocahontas and the Virginian are free spirits who resist the civilized world and follow their own superior moral beliefs. So there are a few things that I think are okay here, and there are definitely a few that I'm going to want to change as I work on my project, but I don't need a perfect thesis. I just need something to start on. So I like the idea that we're at the edge of the civilized world. I think that's good. Obviously, I need to add in the Virginian here. But then I want a different word here for civilized, because I don't want to repeat the same thing twice in my thesis. Even if I'm kind of repeating the same idea a little bit, I need to switch it up. I like that I have free spirits. I think that's good. That's going to let me talk about nature and wilderness. I think those kind of fall into those categories. And then they follow their own superior moral beliefs. I think that's good because that connects to their sense of honor. And the idea of resisting the civilized world, I think I can connect to resistance to marriage. So, this is good for now. I'll probably make a few changes as I continue working and kind of get some better ideas of how to phrase things, or, if I end up changing some of my comparisons, then I'll need to change my thesis too. But I'm on the right track. I have a good start. So for the introduction for the PowerPoint, it asks you to have a thesis and then to introduce the film and the novel. So you need to provide us with short summaries of each one. Give us like the main characters, the conflicts, and don't spoil the endings. Remember, we want to give these summaries as if we were giving them to somebody who saw the movie a few years ago but might not remember all of it. It's also very important that you write original summaries. All right, what this means is that you may not copy and paste anything from IMDb or Wikipedia or any other summaries that you find. It needs to be an original summary that you write with your brain. So make sure to do that for both the film and the novel. So after we've introduced our project with those things, with our thesis and our summaries, we have the body of the presentation. And this is where we're going to give 5 or 6 comparisons of the characters. And I have my 5 here. They're kind of similar, so I'm going to need to make sure that either I present really different evidence of these things, or as I'm working, I'll find some different similarities, some different comparisons that I can talk about that give more varied comparisons, if that makes sense. I can't just say that they're outside society, that they're outside society, that they're outside society. If that's really the same thing, I can't use it 3 times unless I really work on making it different. So as you're putting together your comparisons, make sure that you don't repeat yourself. You need to find some different types of evidence, some different situations, or shades of meaning, and how to make those comparisons different and separate from each other. Okay. So those comparisons are going to form the body of the presentation, the bulk of what you're talking about. And each one will have maybe a slide or 2, maybe a slide or 3. And the other piece that you're going to include in the body to connect with one of your comparisons is the video. Ooh, yellow may not have been a good choice. The video clip. Remember, you're supposed to include a video clip from the film somewhere in your presentation. It should not be longer than 3 minutes, but what I would do is I would find a short clip from my movie and then see if I can connect it to one of my comparisons. So for example, I would maybe do love of nature and wilderness, and then I could use Pocahontas, can you paint with all the colors of the wind? I think that would be a good way to show the lyrics of that song are all about, can you paint with all the colors of the wind? You think you own the land that you walk on and all those things. So if I can find a clip or a song from my movie and connect it with one of the comparisons, I'll be in good shape. Okay, so let's move on. So for an example, this is possibly what one of your comparison slides could look like. I have the trait up at the top, the love of wilderness and the love of nature, and then I have these 2 boxes to show my film hero and the novel hero, and then I have some information underneath each one. So I have like an overview of what I'm going to talk about. But the other thing that you guys are doing with this PowerPoint is you're narrating it. So you're going to narrate your PowerPoint the way that I've been narrating these and posting them on YouTube. But don't worry, y'all don't have to post to YouTube. You'll just email it to me. So as I talk through the content of the slide, I want you to notice, what do I say that adds to what is already on the slide, because it's going to be important that you do not just read what's on the slide for us, that you need to add a little bit more information in what you talk about than what's on the slides. So, both Pocahontas and the Virginian share a love of wilderness and nature, which is one of the traits of the romantic heroes. So Pocahontas is usually surrounded by an animal sidekick. She has Flick, the little hummingbird, who's usually kind of cranky, and her raccoon friend, who usually gets into trouble. And one of the other ways that we see her really engaged with nature is that in one of the first shots, we see her jumping off of this cliff, and she sails down rivers and runs barefoot through the woods. And so, like, her nature is just her home is just in nature. The Europeans came over to this scary new world, but it's just her home. She's a Native American, so we just kind of see her closeness with nature and the way that she and her tribe live right in nature and not really separated from it. And then one of the things she says that kind of shows her view of nature is from her song, Can You Paint with All the Colors of the Wind? She says, I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. And this really shows that she thinks nature is like powerful and spiritual and kind of like a source of truth. So just like Pocahontas has her animal sidekicks, the Virginian is really good with the wild ponies. He is able to lasso the pony in chapter 1 that nobody else can lasso. The narrator kind of observes him, and this is their first meeting. He says, he climbed down with the undulations of a tiger, smooth and easy, like a sudden snake. I saw the noose of the rope go out its length and fall true. So after all these other cowboys tried to catch this wild pony who would not be tamed, the Virginian is like really easily able to capture the pony. And that just shows that not only does he love nature, but he's like really good at being in nature too. So also he was born in the East. He's born in Virginia, but kind of left his whole side of the country behind to go be out in the wilderness of Wyoming, kind of forge his own path with his horse and his lasso and his saddle. And he's always kind of covered in dust and likes to be outside and not really in civilized society. The last thing is that the narrator calls him an ungrammatical son of the soil, which I thought was just like a really poetic thing to say about him. Okay, so hopefully you noticed that I covered what was on the slide, and then I added more to it. I explained a little bit of what I was talking about. So this last slide here is just one more example of how you could structure some of your comparisons. You know, you can do a whole slide just on the Virginian. Maybe I want to talk about the Virginian and Molly and their like love interest, and then I can do a whole slide on them, and then I could do a whole slide on Pocahontas and John Smith. So don't feel like you have to structure all of your slides the same way. If you want to split them up and cover one and then the other, or cover them both on the same slide, it's up to you. You can make those choices on how you want to structure your comparisons. So the last thing that I think you guys should do right now is look over the checklist at the back of the project. That's going to help you to make sure that you know exactly what you need to cover to get 100% full credit on this project. So that's it. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you kind of a starting place and that you feel kind of like you can tackle it. Let me know what questions you have. If they are in regards to adding narration to PowerPoint, I have linked a separate video from somebody else, so you need to watch that video and start to mess around with that. So let me know what you need and we'll get started on all of this. Good luck!